Great.
How's that? Is that any better?
It's still very
So
fucking
exactly
loud.
the same.
I've put it louder. That's what I've done.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, that'll
that'll
do
help.
it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How's
yeah.
this
Good
now?
job.
And now it's too quiet. Just a little bit louder, and then we'll be fine.
Where am I? How am I now? Are
That's good. That's
That's
good.
good. Yeah,
you
yeah,
sure? Or are you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
bored?
I'm bored.
yeah.
Fair enough.
Hey, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's Jonty.
I'm Laura.
I'm Malky.
And I am JL.
JL, thank you so very much for joining us. JL has, when we were trying to set this up, we tried for a while because I think we've been trailing our AI. This is an episode about AI. We've been trailing our AI episode for quite some time,
Long
and
time.
then I kept on fucking up the logistics of it so that we could meet up. So finally, I got it right, and JL has very kindly allowed us to to chat to him during your workday because you're in New Zealand right now. Is that right?
Yes, indeed, I am. And it is summer. So, to all of your listeners, here's a little bit of warmth from New Zealand.
Very kind. Very kind.
Fantastic. And the New Zealand listeners will be like, yeah, it is. Finally, some representation. We're loving it. Jill, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and a kind of snapshot of your career as it might relate to AI?
Yeah, so I currently work for an organization called Nethope, which will welcome all of your subscriptions and donation. Thank you very much. What we do is we're a very large consortium of nonprofits and the tech sector, and we focus on the implementation of digital for humanitarian conservation needs around the world. And in that role, I lead a team of very talented people who are under the umbrella of the Nethope Center for Digital Nonprofit, which seeks to accelerate digital transformation within the sector. One of that is obviously artificial intelligence. My career is born out of luck. I just ended up being at the right place at the right time and managed to get by. And very much like this podcast, I've often done a lot of things wrong. So you'll hear me say some things that are wrong. But in general, a lot of the things that I've done have been right. And they tended to be shaping the world with innovation and others, things like, caller ID or things like electronic trading or electronic prescriptions over the internet and others. So I count myself very fortunate to have been born at the right place at the right time, with the right sex, with the right color in the right place, and having stumbled around there. I know that it's not given to everyone, and so that's why I attribute it mainly to luck and having a great mother as well, and great parents. But
that sounds fantastic. And the whole question of AI in non-profit sectors, is that getting discussed quite a lot? Because I think sometimes we think of the non-profit sector as not having enough money or not being kind of cutting edge enough technologically to be in the space where AI would be useful to them.
it is discussed a lot for a variety of reasons. One, it's the popular topic to talk about, but also there are fundamentally moral and ethical issues surrounding AI that are within the purview of the nonprofits to discuss. And to be clear, about say 98% of a nonprofit worker uses AI on a given day, because we're all prompted by a lack of resources to be more efficient to conduct our mission, and thereby we use the tool of efficiency, which happens today to be artificial intelligence. But in the past, we've used computers and shovels and transportation and others. It's just the tool of the moment. In some nonprofits, there are very much issues of the consequences to humanity about AI, because in the past, we've seen other consequences of technology to humanity. And if you want to point to a recent one that's well discussed and others, is the consequence of internal combustion engines to humanity, which is leading now to the realization that perhaps the warming that we're experiencing, although I know not in the UK at this moment, but is not welcome. 2023 being the hottest year in record, and has potentially disastrous effect on humanity. I mean, it's been talked that we may live on a planet that no longer sustains life. So therefore, we may not live on it. And so we are more cautious about approaching technology than we have been in the past because we now have an experience of it. Likewise, more recent technologies such as social media have created issues such as cyberbullying and an increased rates of suicide and mental health and others that have, simply because they amplify the underlying condition of humanity at scale, created ills to society. So AI is approached both like any new technology with hopes and then with fears. But we tend to discuss more the fears because that's what makes the news. Hopes are, what is the realm of marketing of tech companies.
And so you're saying that a lot of people are treating this with caution, and I'm sure they are, but I feel like the kind of overwhelming impression that I get is that not everyone is. And I feel like just with, capitalism being what it is, it feels like overwhelmingly the kind of conversation about AI is just going to, fall towards, well, that's what is going to make us the most profit, really. So yeah, do you see that being played? How much caution do you think is actually being taken with this?
So the difficulty is that the average human no longer consumes digital technologies enough. So you have to push them to consume more, right? It's a little bit the same that has happened with food and calorie consumptions, right? Once you satisfy your needs, then you have to push people to get something different, whether it's organic, whether it's, better this and better that, right? To the point where surplus and waste is good because it increases production. So the mode of capitalism is always to increase, right? And we have saturated the market, right? There was a time where this conversation could not happen with quality, because there was not enough bandwidth, there was not good microphone, there was not this, there was not that, and that was. But now we could do that in the device that's in our pocket for about $100 if you buy it from an Indian supplier, right? And so there is a need for a whole new sector. Let's remember that the top S&P 500 in the United States is populated now by tech companies only, right? It used to be more retail and others. So the capitalistic machine, because you mentioned capitalism, is prompting us to overconsume digital, right? And what's going to do that? Well, it's the new digital things, right? So if it's AI, it is AI. A few years ago, you would have interviewed me about blockchain, right, and NFTs. Whoops, that one didn't work. But and so that's a natural progression of anything, right? Look at other technologies like vehicles, right? The vehicle manufacturer of your choice will always promote the new features, often labeled in some jargon that is unknown so that nobody questions what it is, right? The XYZ, whatever, right? And because they want you to purchase that new feature as something you would have missed otherwise if you got the model from last year. So that's the model of the next year AI, and that's why it's being pushed quite a lot. But AI is codependent on having data, and sadly, data is the best thing to get the person next to you to move away, is to start a conversation on data. It's dry, it's boring, nobody's interested about that. But yet it is fundamental as the fuel that powers AI. Bad data, imperfect data. Let's remember that we don't have the digital data of most of humanity, right? Around the 1900s is when we started digitalizing stuff, right? With the invention of computers and others. Before that, it's all written, right? And it's all carved, and it's all or forgotten on oral traditions. And then when we started recording, well, we recorded those who had the means of recording, which is money, and thus we recorded essentially the capitalistic world, the world that is functioning around money. So we mainly have records of the northern and western hemisphere, and then in that record, well, of course, we listen to more people like me, old white males, than people like you, Laura, young female. And as a result, we have an imbalance. We have a gender imbalance out of that. So most of the world's information is not digital, and yet we make pre-designed algorithms on that as if it was across the board the reality of humanity. And so when we query engines, mentioning earlier Gen AI, like ChatGPT or others, or when we make decisions, we forget that the underlying conditions beneath that is just, what was there as data. It'd be the same than if we went out in the world and expected to have haggis, typical to you, Malky, as the main staple food, because we grew up with that, and that's the only thing we had, but that's what we have. So we're going to have haggis everywhere, right? We know the reality of a cuisine around the world is not like this. I'm originally French, so I can tell you that from practice and taste. And so that's the main problem, is that we forget that where we start from data, but yet we have the familiarity of the output engine being that. So that's the main issue that we're having there.
I just, God bless you for even talking about haggis as a French person. That must be very hard, and that's the kind of sacrifice you've made to really connect with us, which I love. I freaking love haggis myself, but
Also, because I've been away from Scotland so long, like I'm very much like people mention haggis, I'm like no one really eats haggis. But I was up there for a week, and my nephew had battered haggis with his fish and chips,
with heroin.
and my
With
brother
his fish
ordered
and
that.
chips.
Yeah, oh yeah, just like on the side.
Oh, sure.
It's just not enough.
And a battered Mars bar as well for pudding.
Sorry, Jonty, you were saying.
That's incredible. No. Okay, so talking about data, if AI is powered by data, and if what AI is going to be doing most practically is going to be what it's already started doing, which is helping in large logistics situations and moving things around, automating automated systems, all that kind of stuff. It requires data. It occurs that there are data monopolies emerging. Not monopolies, but there's, you and I cannot set up any kind of enterprise that would gather enough data that would compete with what Google has, what Facebook has, what Alibaba has. That's the. Is there a danger, and can you see, or what are your thoughts on the kind of growing, not monopolies, but the kind of data oligarchies that are starting to kind of emerge, data feudalism?
Like everything, right? They're money hoarders and they're data hoarders, right? And the two seem to go in glove sometimes. But it's not the issue. The issue is about the quality and the representation, right? So if you're asking questions about podcasters, you probably have enough data. Now, you don't need AI to do that, but because you have experience, right? And that experience could be translated into data and others. And you could ask other colleagues and others and suddenly have data sets about podcasters, particularly on Christian and topics. And very quickly, you'd have that data set. So let's not look at the data hoarders as much as what behavior that entails. The behavior of data hoarders is that they don't know what the next question is going to be asked. And therefore, it prompts them to hoard everything that is possible to answer that question. Because otherwise, if you don't get the answer and you expected that answer, it's like going to Scotland, not getting haggis or mushrooms and tomatoes and breakfast, right? It is something that is expected. Even if you don't want to eat it, you're there. And so very quickly, you'll switch to the engine that provides you the answer. And so the need to be relevant in the competitive landscape of machines that answer questions, which is relatively known as artificial intelligence, in a way that human cannot, because it goes beyond the parameters that the average human brain can comprehend, right? So forces you to hoard data out. But it's not, and all the copyright lawsuits and others, it's my data, it's your data, and others, that's happening at the moment. But the reality is that the questions you're asking are really narrow questions, right? And if you have the right data set on that, you may not even need artificial intelligence. I mean, for about 50,000 years. We haven't needed it. We've relied on people called experts, right?
Yeah.
And for
People who have been
example,
trained, people who, yeah, who have studied.
yeah,
Yeah.
so or representative of experts. So you have a fundamental set of books that you've been using called the Old and New Testaments and others, and then representative of that have picked that up called priests and various denominations and others that have made interpretations and use of, and we've relied on those to be able to to steward our life in the proper way according to that faith. Well, that didn't require artificial intelligence. And so we are in the same thing. Now we are trying to steward our life forward based upon the data set of the current, right? We have the nihilism, so we don't require a 2,000-year-old textbook, but we require, yesterday's tweet, or now X because it changes. Why not, right? Um, and there is also an availability of information that is greater than what the mind would consume. So we are trying to distill it very much like a French sauce is distilled out of many ingredients. And we want the perfect sauce as well, because there's that sense of being better than others that is in part prompted by capitalism. We don't want to be in common, right? Communism, but we want to be unique and special. And we have actually lost identity as human beings, right? So you do have identity. I'm seeing you on the screen and you look relatively different, and definitely your beverages seem to be different and your background's different than others, but in the collective we're just another number, another person, another worker, and others. And in creative people you find identity remaining, but in the average mass of society it's quite diluted in others, which is prompting issues of society, suicide and others of youth who don't find an identity in moving forward. And at the same time, the advantage is that it's a lot easier to sell 10,000 pair of jeans that look the same thing, they're ripped at the knee and everything, and so that everybody can look exactly the same, than to make a look that is individual for everybody else. And it's exactly the same that's happening with data, right? We're trying to seek the answer of the now, the answer for me right now, right? How do I cook haggis tomorrow morning for my kids when I live in New Zealand and don't have access to the main ingredients? Do I import it? What is the best haggis? Because I want the best, not the worst, right? Do I ship them to Scotland overnight and that sort of thing? But the reality of existence is not like this. Most people want to live a safe and happy life. They don't require the ultimate Kardashian model of life. And I'm not putting a qualifier in Kardashian. I'm just pointing out that, that's often a role model and influencer out there. I mean, the best influencer in the world, right? One of the best is Jesus Christ, right? He didn't need artificial intelligence or anything to do it, right?
Yeah. Although he did have some help from Constantine, who was pretty fucked up.
all those things, and economies from the Roman Empire and others. But so you don't need artificial intelligence or technology to answer your needs, but you're made to believe that you do. Henceforth, you consume. It's the same thing, right? You don't need haggis to survive, but when you enter Scotland's border, you're made to believe that this is one of the culinary samples that you must, consume in order to have experience, the province, the country as it is. But so you're always in that mode of dissatisfying yourself with what is perceived to be the expectation of satisfaction that is created out there, because you paid for it. Now, haggis is not free. AI is not free. Nothing is free. And we want you to consume. If everything was free, we would live more a peaceful, maybe tribal society, whereby things would be based upon barter and exchange and others, and maybe there would be no uber needs. And I think we are having those reflections as societies when universal basic income is being discussed, and other elements of things. So, so I think that at the basic thing, we need to have set levels of what does it mean to be a human being living in today's world, and then realize that we're prompted to want more, but not specifically to need more. And then to return to AI, then maybe we don't need all of the AI that is pitched out to us, but certain AI that's going to be very helpful for us to be able to do. So, for example, I'm not an English speaker and an English writer. That's not my mother tongue, which is French, not even the second language I learned. But I find out that engines that have been trained in English language, like the famous ChatGPT, are quite helpful to rewrite something for me in a better English, right? And if I am a applicant of a job that is from a country that doesn't speak English at all, and I've managed to get three things together halfway in English, then that engine, that AI, is very good for me as my translator to get my job application to be read comprehensibly by an English speaker. And in which case it's useful for me, because otherwise I would be able to write in a broken English and others. So there is a value to it, but what we have to ask ourselves is, what's my value? And then we have to ask ourselves, and what is the advice that we're getting? Because technology brings familiarity, which is kind of interesting. The more we use it, the more it's familiar. And with familiarity, it brings credibility. I am guaranteeing you that you go to one church with one priest and others and have not thought about going to another town and listen to another priest, because over time you have a familiarity with the ecosystem that you participate in. You have built friends, you have a community, you have a schedule, you have a place to go to, and that sort of things, right? And it's the same thing with AI. So eventually AI will become a risk to religious practices, because it will become that familiar thing that always answers your questions. So why would you go anywhere else to answer it? And while religion itself will make use of AI to make, auto sermons and sermons that are done for you in the language that you want at the moment that you need it, based upon your thoughts and others, right? The use of technology. The reality is that over time, and Herbert Simon, who is the Nobel Prize, has demonstrated that we want to satisfy, which is satisfy and suffice, right? He has created that word as human being, and we just don't want anywhere else and anything else. So which means that to the extent that AI satisfies us, which is it gives us at the moment of need the stuff we wanted appropriately correct, then we'll be going back to it and back to it and back to it again. But let's remember that where that comes from. That comes from flawed data. So we will essentially perpetuate and continue the ills of humanity. Ills of colonialism, ills of power, ills of system of economic oppressions, ills of lack of representations of gender or age, or or preferences in looks, fields, ideologies, and others. Why? Because those are not the average of the representation of the data, and so we'll get the average, right? AI is a giant statistical engine that's a little bit more than that, but not much more.
Are there mechanisms or kind of legislation that we can put in to help overcome those ills, and how likely do you think those are to succeed?
Yeah, I think that very much like food, that has over time forced transparencies and say, hey, where does that product comes from? Show me the label of origin, right? It's grapes, but it's the middle of winter, so tell me where it's coming from and what's the calorie content of it. The little white label on the side that tells you, how much salt there is and how much sugars, and whether the sugars are refined and the fats are this and others, right? So transparency and information in a standardized way will be needed for AI to say, okay, this data is based on Northern Hemisphere white conservative male. Great. maybe if I am a female and I'm more leaning towards the liberal side, and maybe that's not what I want to consume as my decision making. And in the same way, then we go to, a church versus a temple versus a mosque, right? Because we choose those communities, right? We are going to choose based upon the transparency labels, but they don't exist today. Today we consume technology and we don't know what's behind it. The error is asking for the algorithm. The algorithm is difficult to do with AI because it's no longer an algorithm. But saying, the data sets that have fed that engines or data set from that will be important. So increased transparency is the realm of government. The other thing is that AI will be always used for good and bad, and like any technology. There are many people that have been killed by a hammer, but the hammer was not invented to kill. It was invented to screws. No, not to hammer nails, of course, right? But though it does pretty good at screws. But so in that same realm, technology will be used for the ill. So ensuring that laws and principles are appropriate to capture that negative aspect within the legislation, and then they don't slip out of it. Say, oh, we didn't think about AI. We talked about everything, hammers and everything, but the AI, we didn't think about it. So it's no longer a crime. We have to change it, right? That laws encompass future emergence of technologies is important. Specifically, that technology will always outpace the politics and the policies, right? So it'll be always faster, right? So recently, in some countries, I think maybe in the UK, there's been a ban of certain vaping flavors. Within seconds, the flavors have been renamed, right? So let's not make errors in being so prescriptive as to ban flavors of AI, but maybe looking at it and saying, any use of technology for negative purpose is there. The problem is that you enter civil liberties and the right of expressions and others. So countries that have used that technique tend to be labeled as oppressive governments and others by others, because there's always that fringe of problematic speech that exists at the creative side that is prevented as a result of having this legislation and others. But I think that humanity in general, if it's smart enough to be able to have the constant dialogue, so not in an oppressive society, but in a democratic society, in a republic where there can be a dialogue, can adjust for that over time. The loss of creativity may be temporarily an acceptable problem to have because we won't have the loss of lives. And to the extent the loss of creativity is just temporary, which is months, weeks, right? Not decades, right? Then that might be an okay trade-off.
Yeah, as ever with limitations on freedom, I guess. It sounds like, AI is just going to give us more of what we have more intensely. We have capitalist overreach. There's going to be capitalist overreach with this. Is there anything unique that AI actually does bring to the table? Is there anything that I think AI is going to change more than just kind of accentuate or amplify what we already have?
It's going to enable us to see what we don't see as human beings. It's already made use of that in the classic example is analysis of medical imagery. We make less error with AI because AI is able to diagnose tumors, for example, in a better way than a pathologist can do it, particularly a tired pathologist. It works 24/7 as well. What we have to remember with AI is like it's with any technology that humanity has created. We fear it will replace us, but then eventually we bring it in our workflows, right? And let's remember you're in the UK, right? So let's talk about the red flag law, right? Which said that at the beginning of the automobile, every automobile had to be preceded with a person walking in front with a red flag so that horses would not be scared. Right? you hardly see that on the motorway going to London these
No,
days.
but I'd like to see that with the horses I see on the road, actually. Just
Yeah,
somebody needs to warn me there's a horse. That's the most important part.
yeah, yeah. It avoids the hit. So the thing is, we will incorporate that the way we want. We're quite smart as human beings in incorporating technology. The problem is when that technology is imperfect and too familiar. And that's what I was bringing the familiarity earlier, because we end up trusting it more. So all of you have experienced this with technology. The first time you saw technology, think about maybe a smartphone or others. You're like, wow. You talk to your friends, say, hey, Laura quotes John T. John T. quotes Malky. Say, look at that new stuff, that microphone that Malky has in front of him. What a cool microphone and everything. I can't believe it does this and that and that and that and that, until the last time he used it, which is to say, how can this thing not auto volume based upon the distance of my face to the microphone? I mean, I can't believe technology is capable of doing that, right? So now I'm seeking the new technology, right? I have a new problem. And so our technology approach is always the same. We marvel with what it does, a little bit afraid sometimes, but marveled. And then later on, we're very disappointed with it. And we'll continue having the cycles, which prompts us to make the technology better for the problem of the moment. The nice thing is it creates a whole new sector of economy and ecosystems that we never thought about before, right? Before the cars, there were very few mechanics, right? But then we created the mechanics. And before the computers, there were no computer engineers. And before the podcast, there were no podcasters. Right?
Bold of you to assume we're getting paid for this.
Well, I'm not suggesting that the activity is always remunerated, but at least enjoy.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I always am thinking of when we're talking about having the AI debate is, because you're exactly right. Things like autocorrect, that is a machine learning kind of system that we've just kind of incorporated into our daily lives. And I think you're right that so much of the things that we're kind of freaking out about now in terms of AI is just, a few years down the line, they are just going to be incorporated into our systems. So it is the stuff that we're kind of panicking about now. Is that really AI? And is there kind of, is there a different kind of level of AI that is actually kind of close to human intelligence that actually exists and could be seen as more of a actual, I don't know if we'd call it a threat, but is that something that could potentially exist?
The thing is this, is that as humans, specifically myself, I make a lot of errors, right? But aside from my family and the farm here and others in general, the impact of those errors is minuscule, right? I've yet to kill somebody, so just to be clear, right? To set the level of things. So I might, burn an omelet in the morning because I decided to listen to your podcast to see how my voice was translated into it and that sort of thing, but not much more than that. The problem is when we do that at scale with large masses of people, and then those errors are massive. And that's, I think, where AI enables us to do messes at a larger scale and faster that individually we would have been done as a single human or even a tribe of humans. And for that, there may be no return, right? We may F it up so much that we're gone, right? It's the classic, there's no game over in real life, right? There's game over in everything digital, but not, you restart, reboot, and continue with a new life. You don't get a second life. And so if humanity tends to overconsume it in an overconfidence way and makes big, huge mistakes, then it is possible that we will obliterate the human race, the planet, the entire solar system. I don't know. I mean, but I told you I was going to say things that are going to be wrong all the time. But definitely we'll make mistakes and they'll be big. And that's that propensity of making very large mistakes faster and more of them that technology enables. As much as doing good, but in general, technology has never demonstrated to be more good. It facilitates continuing humanity forward. But show me a technology that has been good other than some medical technologies. It's going to be very difficult to identify those. So in general, we want to avoid a creation of systems that make very large mistakes very fast, because it might be harder to recover from those. And maybe, Malky, that goes to that policy, which is like, no technology should make mistakes that jeopardizes humanity. But then we have one, right? Internal combustion engine that is doing that. So let's not, and perhaps even social media and others polarizing the debate and others. So in that sense, I think that we're not doomed, but we're increasingly having the potential of being doomed. But we are human, right? So we saw that through the nuclear proliferation, right? We were always X seconds away from the proverbial button. It's actually a clock running somewhere that says, how many seconds we are to Armageddon and others. But successfully, we've managed not to press the button. It's pretty good so far. I mean, despite the threat that, whether it is a northern government above South Korea or the United States under a certain administration and others, is always, or others, is always ready to press, right? The reality is we haven't pressed it, right? Because we have at the core of ourselves an instinct of self-preservation, and we know that pressing that one just goes too far. So I hope that we realize that through AI and not overuse AI in a bad way and say, but that one might go too far. Yes, we can, but we won't, because that's not the desired outcome we want.
Yeah, because I mean, right now you could have an escalation between Israel and Iran, which would draw in other countries, which should potentially start a world war, and we didn't need AI for that at all. Yeah. That's just classic human intelligence.
Right, and I want to go back to that amplification of underlying human conditions, right? We're flawed as humans. There's no questions about it. The entire Christian religion is a documentation of as much as our flaws and our expectations to be better, right? So as flawed entities, right, what we don't want is to accelerate those flaws to the point of no return. But we don't need AI or technologies to do that, right? We do perfectly well on our own. And as long as we continue modalities of economic systems, modalities of assembly, modalities of governments and others that have been born in the past and not change those towards the current and the future, we will continue the mistakes of the past. We'll repeat them in others. And it's hard, because at the same time, this is what history, traditions, culture, and others is anchored into.
And I think economically, we're currently looking at just the latest generation of where people were put out of work by some kind of automation, some kind of technology, entire fields of craftsmanship or artisans or whatever who just disappeared because we created machines that could do that work. And I guess a lot of the kind of talk about the doom that AI is going to bring is that it's going to do all this stuff that used to require humans. And isn't that terrible? And it is terrible for those humans. But I think I've always just thought that this is kind of but this always happens. There's always going to be automation. The problem is if you live in an economic system where the automation is bad news rather than good news. Automation should be, yay, there's less work for us to do. And if it's bad news, that's more the context than the technology, right?
So, we tend to automate things that don't need automating because we should really change the way we work. And so we automate the inefficiencies of the workplace or life. the reality is that we should find other ways of doing the stuff. But we find that a machine is better at reproducing the ineffective way of doing things that we hated anyway. So take an example of the current fear in reality is that there's a whole category of people who are employed in reading very large documents, typically generated by United Nations or governments and others, and summarizing them in something that somebody can read within less than an hour. Those experts are going to be gone. AI will replace those. AI will do a good enough summary that the consumer will be able to get that. Oh, but that's horrible. Yeah, but why did we start those long documents to start with? Because this is
Exactly.
not, you know.
If no one's reading them, then why are we? Yeah, it's so
I've read, Zen koans that are far shorter than that, right? I mean, so what we have done is creating an efficient mechanism, prose, in that sense, policy prose, right? Which is dry and unconsumable than others. And we're recorrecting that through automation. In the meanwhile, we had created people that would correct that inefficiency. The loss of those jobs is actually the loss of an inefficient mechanism of production, that's returning there to be efficient, which is producing things. So the funny thing is, it will make longer documents because people will use AI to make bigger documents, and then other AI will summarize it, right? But it's the nature of society, right? I mean, we assemble ourselves in urban settlements, right? Only to cry on the weekend to return to the beach or the countryside and others and miss it, right? Or so that's why we are good as human beings. That's why we're flawed, right? That's why we create those inefficient systems, and that's why we create automation. So yes, we'll cry for a while that certain jobs have disappeared, and for a moment it will be important for those people. I'm not diminishing the fact of the single income family that's barely making it in Scotland, not being able to purchase the regular weekly haggis, right, and having to suffer and skip haggis meals, right? That's a reality, and it's hard as the individual experience, but as a collective experience. It'll be something that we will forget about because that won't be remembered in the annals of society. What we'll remember is that at one point there was a tool which we had a red flag law about called AI, right? And then now we're using it on a routine basis and we actually don't care about it because it's just like electricity, part of our daily life. We're more worried when it's off than when it's on.
The one thing that I think has really exercised people's imagination about will be taken over and that can be taken over by AI is creative stuff. And I saw a cute meme that was like, I was really hoping that the robots would take over the hard work. Do they really have to write the poems and paint the pictures while we carry on working, or could we switch that around? And I don't know, Malky, you've probably got thoughts on this as well because you're a graphic artist. There's a whole bunch of kind of conversations happening among artists about AI stealing their work and replacing people. I mean, I don't know what Malky, do you want to jump in with that as well?
I don't know. I'm just I'm fascinated by
Laura.
I have thoughts, but
no, Laura.
I'm fascinated by JL's approach and less afraid of the image generation models, like just hearing your kind of approach. It's a lot of this discourse is happening on Twitter, so you can imagine the nature of it. And I think a lot is reactionary in terms of don't take our jobs. We're kind of certain individuals who are illustrators or whatever will be barely making a living because they're doing their craft, and will be afraid of losing that income. And one angle, a lot of people, I think people are genuinely angry about it, or whether it's just an angle to try and take down the system, is on the copyright on whether these images are being scraped ethically, and they're not, or I can't think of, I think Adobe are trying to do a version where people are consenting, but most of them are scraping images that are just, all over the place, and to the point that you'll see some images, they'll replicate watermarks from stock image sites. But yeah, I don't know if there's a question in there. I suppose my question to you would be, do you think the kind of human soul will crave, and do you think will crave the kind of human author? Because part of me does think, will I be able to tell the difference between listening to a song that's been produced by AI and think, yeah, that's a tune? Will I be suckered into it? Whereas I'm trained to look at images now and I'll go, I can see his eyes are off or the shadow's a bit wrong. Whereas 95% of people will be like, oh yeah, that looks awesome. And
The shadows are off.
Nobody will care.
Yeah.
That's not what people are after. So if you go to a popular crowdsourcing website and you ask for a logo and you're a small business, you get, for the price of, a few hundred quids, maybe 20 people around the world to contribute to you exactly the same logo that look exactly like another logo, because that's the logo trend with exactly the same color and exactly the same style and others, right? The challenge is that there are very few Leonardo da Vinci's in the creativity, or Mozart or others. There are very few masters. And we live in a world where creativity has been mixed with that unique artistry that makes the difference between what was there before and what is there afterwards, whether it be Picasso or whether it be, Vermeer or others. And we are in the industrialized art issue and industrialized creativity. With industrialized creativity, well, sorry, with any industrial process, automation comes in at one point. And unfortunately, we have done that with a lot of people who were doing the job by hand. The sewing machine and the loom did exactly the same thing to people who used to sew, right? And people who used to make objects out of wood ended up being replaced by factories. And the same with, the mass production of, cookware that was done out of cast iron versus, handmade and others. And for that matter, food, like bread, has been done by machines and no longer by artisan boulanger, right? And so what has happened is that those who had creativity within themselves have been forced to create Bensky type stuff, which is something that is memorable and referenceable in others. That is quite different than what was there before, right? I know I prefer Bensky than Christo, but there's a bunch of other things out there, right? Something that is different, something that attracts attention. And then, of course, that will be copied again, right? There'll be, the automation will catch up, because if it's popular, then the automation has to mass produce it and others. To the point where, and we see that cycle all over, right? Which is, at the beginning, the goblet you drank your favorite beverage from, whatever it is, alcoholized or not, right, was made by an artisan. The cup of Christ was not made industrially by a factory, right? Let's be realistic there. It's made by an artisan. And then eventually we've made it by machines. And today, if you really want to have that glass or that thing, well, you're going to have to return to an artisan to have it, because everything else looks the same. And I return to that loss of identity, right? If you want to be you and not everyone, and you want to differentiate yourself, then you're going to want to pay more for it. And funnily enough, those things cost 10 times as much. Go to any art shop and you want to get the goblet, the whatever, the cup, the whatever, it's 10 times as much as the price at your average Tesco or Marks and Spencer's and others, right? And it's not made in China. Fortunately enough, it's made there in that local village. And you may not have it anywhere else than if you travel there, right? And that's what enables the economic production for creators to continue to have survivability in a better way than the famous creators of past, say Renaissance and others, who ended up having their art appreciated only after their death, so made no penny, but enabling others to make a penny later on, right? So we always have this production from artisan to industrialization to return to artisan, but in a different way. So I think that we'll find the same. The more saturated we'll be with the same art, but the same artificial intelligence, with no creativity, the more we will go to the Malkis of the world and say, please do me something that doesn't look like the other things, right? And that's where humanity shines, right? And but eventually your art will be copied, right? So you'll have to over-invent yourself time and again and time and again. But that's what humanity is about, right? We don't always reproduce exactly the same thing that we've done before. We do it differently.
I think the thing I was going to jump in with, which I think the penny has dropped on something that I think you said, Jonty, earlier, in that Jonty and I have had many arguments about AI that I've not really agreed with you with, but I don't know if I fully believe that this is right. I have been sitting thinking about this since you were speaking, but is the problem more that we have created a system and society in which you can only create if you're able to profit off of it? Like we're afraid of these things taking our jobs because if they take our jobs, then we have no other way that we can feasibly create the things we want to create. And I don't think that's entirely true because maybe you like drawing pictures of Jordan Peterson for your job, but I don't know. Like, is that more what the problem is rather than the fact that we're going to be maybe be replaced or like this system is going to go. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that, but
well, so if we want to satisfy ourselves and if we want to find joy and happiness in the world, then we have to ask ourselves if joy and happiness is not obtained through work, paid employment, if it's happened through volunteer employment, such as this podcasting and others, then why do we work? Doesn't mean why do we not have activities? And wouldn't it be nice if automation enables us to find joy back in our lives by doing the activities we care for, as opposed to the activities we're forced to do in order to provide taxable income to the government and that sort of things and others, right? So we perhaps are at a transitional moment whereby we are redefining what work means as an activity that is pleasurable and enjoyable, as opposed to an activity that's remunerated. Unfortunately, that clashes with most capitalistic system, which is the dominant system that exists today in society, and henceforth has a problem because we need more money to consume more. This is a very much snowballing moment, right? If there's no snow, the snowball doesn't grow, right? So you need to have both the snow and the momentum, the snowball. But we might arrive at a society, and I'm talking long term, maybe a century forward, right? Where we satisfy ourselves because so much has been automated that we have a choice to do what we love, no longer what we have to do, and often, sadly, that we hate. And then they are no longer oppressive models, but they are generative models and others. Hence, by maybe artistry and creativity returns as a mode of production as opposed to having it as a mode of consumption. In other words, being paid for your art versus generating the art because you love it and you find pleasure into it.
Yeah, and I think when people are, getting really sniffy about AI art and, oh, it'll just be generated after scraping other people's art, I'm like, do you know how many sequels are made in Hollywood every year? Do you know how much focus grouped creativity is out there? How many courses there are that will tell you how to write exactly the same novel? And all of us are consuming some of that. Like we're not that pure. I think it's just that even now, when you look at, the kind of roll of pictures coming through your social media feed, you'll see AI after AI image, and after a while you're like, ugh, lame. And I mean, it's only been fashionable for what, 6 months? And I'm already tired of it, and I can already see. And again, some of it you don't see. You know, I listened to a Blinkist podcast thing, and it was like, this was read to you by an AI. I was like, wow, that's cool. I thought this narrator was good. So sorry, voice actors. But yeah, just like it's not as simple as AI did this because so much of our culture has already become quite like formulaic, especially the really popular stuff, because the real kind of data model science behind it is trying to work out what the next trend will be and manipulate people into following it.
I think that you're nailing it there, which is eventually we get blasé and bored out of it. The problem is when the blasé and bored is actually pleasurable, which is and desirable. So take famous actors and famous voices, right? David Attenborough as an example of a person who narrates on nature, right? You'd want David Attenborough past his death forever, narrating, things. And AI will make that possible. And that way it is stealing David Attenborough's voice identity into it. The likewise of images of your favorite actor, whomever they are, favorite singer group or others, right? And when that is perpetuated and repeated and repeated and repeated because you want it, because it's desirable to you, it's your style, it's what you want more of it, you wish they publish more. That's where I think that it's impinging on the right of the human being to be unique and not duplicated in others, and they have to be very careful of what rights they give away, particularly when you can manipulate age across, right? You can have backed a next series of Harry Potter with the actors at the same age than when they filmed it, though they have grown up and others. So I think that's the big issue that we're seeing. So it's not the industrialized aspect of it; it's that more unique, Golden Globes type things, BAFTA type things, which gets copied because that's unfair to those who have achieved that mastery to be industrialized.
Yeah. If you're in a boy band, you really shouldn't complain. But if you were actually making grunge in 1992, you could. That's just just if I had to pick any kind of things. We've come quite close to the end. JL, thank you so much for your time. We didn't ask everybody what they're drinking, and I think it's important that we do. Laura, what you drinking?
Sorry, you asked me that literally as I had a mouthful.
I know, I watched
Thanks. Thanks, Val. I'm drinking a cider from the deli in Dunster, which I bought when I was on holiday in Somerset, and I bought it from the deli in Dunster. So it is a very nice cider, and I would recommend if you're ever in the small village of Dunster in Somerset.
Excellent. Melts, what you drinking?
I'm drinking a San Miguel with actual alcohol. It's
Really?
I've just decided it's my New Year's resolution.
You're gonna start drinking.
Start drinking
Like
again.
January.
Yeah.
Next week, I'm drinking crystal meth. And, yeah.
Check back in.
JL, it's morning there. What are you drinking, if anything?
So I'm drinking a clear liquid that has come from the sky on my roof, flowed the pipe, got into my tanks, and has been captured for me to be able to drink it later. It's called rainwater.
Incredible.
And that's what happens when you live most sustainably out there. And I can tell you, it tastes delicious.
It sounds amazing, not gonna lie. I have been drinking my version of Kinshasa with honey and an Irish whiskey called Sexton and lemon juice, which has been nice. But I also have a really big glass of slightly terrifyingly pink liquid, which is Immune. If there are South Africans listening, you'll know what it is. It's like these effervescent tablets of vitamins and minerals and stuff, and it's supposed to make you not get sick. I'm taking it too late because I am sick. So that's been the drink of choice tonight as well. So rock and roll. It's weird. I'm not drinking. Well, I am drinking alcohol. I was about to say I'm not drinking alcohol because one of my drinks doesn't have alcohol in it.
1 out of 3. That counts.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe I have a problem. I don't know. Anyway, JL, thank you so much for joining us. Is there any final thing you'd like to say to people about AI and about what they may be getting wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I'm not an AI. I'm a human being, right? So Or at least like last I checked, right?
Plot twist.
And yeah, plot twist. And as a consequence of that, a lot of what I said today is wrong. So don't take that to the bank. But a lot of what AI will tell you will be wrong as well, because it'll be based on the data that's scraped out of that postcat and reproduced back to you later on, right?
Yeah.
And so let's remember that we should take pride in the fact that we're not perfect as humans. And let's make sure that the mistakes we make are not too big too often, and that we remain imperfect. That's part of being who we are and our identity. And there will be another technology we're afraid of. And there's another technology that we will use without thinking twice about. And that's the nature of our humanity. So in that, return back to your values, whatever they are, wherever they come from, and then make sure that whatever technology you use is representative of your value, what's in your heart, and not what's in front of you on the screen.
Thank you, JL. You can listen to our other episodes at beerchristianity.co.uk. You can write to us, beerchristianity@yahoo.com. If you want to listen to our music show, you can find it New Old Music on Spotify. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah, leave us a voice note on Instagram. We're on Instagram and like Facebook and whatever. And if I manage to get this out beforehand, go to the Palestine March in London if you're anywhere near there. And
on the 13th of January.
On the 13th of January. Yeah, I don't want to send you just any Saturday, like searching around. Yo, where's the Palestine people at? That's it. Thank you so much for listening, and bye.
Bye.